Rachel Thompson's life was the kind of success story many admired from the outside. At just 29 years old, she had built a thriving graphic design business in the heart of Austin, Texas. Known for her bold, creative branding for small businesses, Rachel's work often graced storefronts, websites, and social media feeds. Her style was distinct, vibrant, yet polished, and her reputation for perfectionism earned her a steady stream of high-profile clients. But beneath her professional accolades lay a struggle that few, if any, saw coming, an overwhelming, unrelenting battle with anxiety. Rachel's daily life was a delicate balancing act, one that felt like walking a tightrope in a windstorm. Her mornings started early, usually with a cup of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other, as she scanned emails, text messages, and client requests. By the time she reached her office, she was already bracing herself for the day's barrage of tasks: meetings, design drafts, client revisions, and team check-ins. She wore many hats: designer, manager, problem solver, and often felt like she was falling short in all of them. The pressure to perform was something Rachel carried silently. She rarely complained, believing that her success came with a price: sleepless nights, constant self-doubt, and the gnawing fear that she wasn't doing enough. Her inner critic was relentless, whispering that any mistake could unravel everything she had worked so hard to build. Rachel's anxiety reached a tipping point after her company lost one of its biggest clients 6 months ago. While the decision wasn't a reflection of her work, she internalized it as a personal failure. "I should have seen it coming," she told herself repeatedly. That loss became a seed of self-doubt that grew into a forest of worry. What if other clients left? What if her team lost confidence in her leadership? What if she wasn't as good as people thought she was? These questions haunted her during the day and kept her awake at night. She would lie in bed, her mind racing with scenarios that felt impossible to control. Her physical health began to suffer. She experienced frequent headaches, a tightening in her chest, and occasional nausea before important meetings. Even the act of sitting down to design something she once loved felt like a monumental task. Her personal life wasn't immune to the effects of her anxiety. Rachel's boyfriend, Eric, had always been her biggest cheerleader, but even he struggled to connect with her. "You're here, but you're not really here," he said one evening after Rachel canceled their dinner plans for the 3rd time that month. Friends who once filled her weekends with laughter and support began drifting away as she declined invitation after invitation, citing her ever-growing workload. The longer Rachel avoided addressing her anxiety, the more its grip tightened. Her habit of over-preparing and second-guessing herself meant that simple tasks took twice as long, leaving her feeling perpetually behind. She began avoiding situations that triggered her anxiety, like presenting ideas to clients or attending industry networking events. The avoidance provided temporary relief, but came at a cost. Her business growth stalled, and her self-confidence eroded. The lowest point came during a pitch meeting with a new client, a boutique hotel chain she had been eager to work with. As she stood before the room, her heart pounded, her palms grew sweaty, and her mind went blank. She stumbled through the presentation, barely making it to the end before the client politely cut the meeting short. Rachel left the building feeling humiliated and convinced she wasn't cut out for her role. That night, she replayed the incident over and over in her mind. She felt like a fraud, someone who had been lucky to get this far but was bound to lose it all. The thought of facing another day filled her with dread. For the first time, Rachel began to wonder if she needed help. It was Eric who finally nudged her toward taking the first step. After noticing how Rachel's anxiety was affecting her health and happiness, he shared an article he had read about therapy for managing anxiety. "You don't have to carry this alone," he told her gently. "Maybe talking to someone could help." Rachel hesitated. The idea of opening up to a stranger about her struggles felt daunting. "What if they think I'm weak?" she asked. "You're one of the strongest people I know," Eric replied. "Asking for help doesn't make you weak, it makes you human." After some convincing, Rachel booked an appointment with Dr. Vincent Vale, a cognitive behavioral therapist renowned for his practical, no-nonsense approach to anxiety management. The idea of meeting a therapist still made Rachel nervous, but she knew she couldn't keep going the way she had been. As she walked into Dr. Vale's office, a warm, inviting space filled with books and calming artwork, Rachel felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a... Rachel sat in the waiting room of Dr. Vincent Vale's office, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She glanced around the room, taking in the soothing decor, soft earth tones, a bookshelf filled with titles about resilience and mental health, and a small fountain bubbling quietly in the corner. Despite the calming environment, Rachel felt her anxiety bubbling under the surface. Her heart raced as she wondered if she'd made a mistake coming here. What if he thinks I'm being dramatic, she thought. What if there's nothing he can do to help? Her thoughts were interrupted when the door opened, and Dr. Vale stepped out. He was a tall man with a warm, approachable demeanor, his gray-streaked hair giving him the air of someone wise, but not intimidating. "Rachel," he said, offering a friendly smile. "Come on in." As she followed him into the office, Rachel noticed how intentional the space felt. The lighting was soft, but bright enough to feel welcoming, and the furniture was modern yet cozy. She sat down on a plush armchair, and Dr. Vale settled into the chair across from her. He rested a notepad on his knee, but didn't write anything down immediately. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his body language open and attentive. "So," he began, his tone kind but curious, "what's been weighing on you?" Rachel hesitated, unsure where to start. Finally, she said, "I feel like I'm constantly on edge. It's like my mind won't stop racing no matter what I do. I keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong, and it's exhausting." Dr. Vale nodded, his expression empathetic. "That sounds overwhelming," he said. "It takes a lot of courage to come here and talk about it. Let's take it one step at a time." Over the next few sessions, Rachel and Dr. Vale worked to untangle the web of thoughts and behaviors contributing to her anxiety. One of the first exercises he introduced was a thought journal. Each evening, Rachel was tasked with writing down her anxious thoughts, identifying the situations that triggered them, and reflecting on how they made her feel. At first, Rachel found the exercise uncomfortable. "Do I really have to write everything down?" she asked during their second session. "It feels like I'm just giving my anxiety more power." Dr. Vale explained that the purpose wasn't to dwell on her fears, but to observe them without judgment. "Think of it like shining a flashlight in a dark room," he said. "When you see what's there, it becomes less intimidating." As Rachel practiced, she began to notice patterns. Many of her worries were tied to perfectionism, her fear of making mistakes or disappointing others. "I keep thinking that if I don't do everything perfectly, people will see me as a failure," she admitted during one session. Dr. Vale nodded. "That's a common thought pattern called catastrophizing. Your mind jumps to the worst-case scenario, even when it's unlikely to happen. The good news is we can challenge those thoughts and reframe them." Dr. Vale introduced Rachel to techniques for managing her anxiety in the moment. One of the first was grounding exercises, which helped her reconnect with the present when her thoughts started spiraling. He taught her a simple technique called the 5-4-3-2-1 method, where she identified 5 things she could see, 4 she could touch, 3 she could hear, 2 she could smell, and 1 she could taste. During one particularly stressful morning, Rachel tried the exercise while sitting in her car before a client meeting. At first, she felt silly. "What is this even supposed to do?" she thought. But as she went through the steps, she noticed her breathing slowing, her racing thoughts quieting just enough for her to focus on the task ahead. Another practice Rachel adopted was mindful breathing. Dr. Vale explained how intentional breaths could signal to her nervous system that she was safe. "When you breathe deeply and slowly, you're telling your brain that there's no immediate danger," he said. "It's a way to break the cycle of panic." Though skeptical at first, Rachel began incorporating mindful breathing into her daily routine. particularly during moments of overwhelm. Over time, these small changes started to make a big difference. The journey wasn't without challenges. There were days when Rachel felt frustrated by the slow pace of progress. "I just want to feel normal again," she said during one particularly tough session. "Why does this have to be so hard?" Dr. Vale reassured her that healing wasn't a linear process. "Think of it like planting seeds," he said. "You won't see results overnight, but with time and care, those seeds will grow into something strong and lasting." One breakthrough came when Rachel realized how much energy she had been spending avoiding her anxiety triggers. "I always thought avoiding stressful situations was helping me, but now I see it's only making things worse," she said. Together, she and Dr. Vale worked on a strategy called exposure therapy, where she gradually faced the situation she feared in a controlled and supportive way. By the end of this phase, Rachel began to see her anxiety not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a signal to be understood. She learned to recognize the stories her mind was telling her and to challenge the ones that weren't true. "I'm starting to see that I don't have to believe everything I think," she said during one session. "That's freeing," Dr. Vale smiled. "That's a powerful realization, Rachel. You're not your thoughts. You're the one who chooses how to respond to them." Rachel's transformation was well underway, but her journey was about to face its greatest test, an invitation to present her design portfolio to a potential client, a major retail chain with a nationwide presence. Securing this contract would be a game changer for her business, but it also brought the weight of enormous expectations. For Rachel, the idea of presenting to such a high-profile client was both exciting and terrifying. Her mind was already racing with what-ifs. What if I mess up? What if they think my ideas are amateur? What if I'm not good enough? During their next session, Rachel shared her apprehension with Dr. Vale. "I don't think I can do it," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I'll probably freeze like I did last time, and then I'll lose the chance for good." Dr. Vale leaned forward, his expression calm and reassuring. "Rachel, the fact that you're nervous means you care, but we've been building tools to help you navigate exactly this kind of situation. Let's break it down together." Dr. Vale helped Rachel create a game plan for the presentation, starting with reframing her mindset. "Instead of focusing on what could go wrong, let's focus on what you can control," he suggested. He encouraged Rachel to set realistic expectations for herself, emphasizing that the goal wasn't perfection, but authenticity and connection. Next, they worked on her preparation strategy. Together, they broke the presentation into smaller, manageable steps. Content creation. Rachel would dedicate focused time blocks to developing her portfolio, free from distractions like email or social media. Rehearsal. She would practice her delivery in front of a mirror and record herself to fine-tune her tone and pacing. Visualization. Each evening, Rachel would spend 5 minutes visualizing herself delivering a confident, engaging presentation. They also revisited the grounding techniques Rachel had learned earlier. The 5-4-3-2-1 method can help you stay present if your nerves spike, Dr. Vale reminded her. And don't forget to breathe deeply. It's your best tool for calming your body. Rachel threw herself into the preparation process, leaning on these tools every step of the way. While she still felt nervous, the structure gave her a sense of control she hadn't felt in years. The day of the presentation arrived, and Rachel woke up feeling the familiar pang of anxiety. Her chest felt tight, her hands clammy, and her thoughts swirled with doubt. For a brief moment, she considered canceling, but she remembered Dr. Vale's words. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and moving forward anyway. Before heading to the meeting, Rachel spent a few moments grounding herself. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and repeated her mantra. I am prepared. I am capable. I can handle this. As she entered the boardroom, Rachel's heart pounded, but she focused on the environment around her, the polished table, the soft hum of conversation, the friendly nods from the clients. She reminded herself to stay present, Rachel began her presentation with a brief introduction, her voice trembling slightly. But as she moved through her slides, something shifted. The structure she had worked so hard to create gave her confidence, and she found herself speaking with clarity and passion. She made eye contact with the clients, pausing to emphasize key points, and even cracked a small joke that earned a laugh. At one point, a client asked a challenging question about her design choices. Normally, this would have thrown Rachel off, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself to focus on the question, not the fear. She responded thoughtfully, explaining her rationale and tying it back to the client's brand values. By the end of the presentation, the room was filled with nods of approval. One of the executives leaned forward and said, "This is exactly the kind of creativity and vision we're looking for. We'd love to move forward with you." Rachel felt a wave of relief and pride. She had done it, not perfectly, but authentically, and that was enough. That evening, Rachel met with Eric to celebrate. Over dinner, she shared how the presentation had gone. "I was so scared," she admitted, "but I used the tools Dr. Vale taught me, and they worked. I actually felt in control." Eric smiled. "I'm so proud of you, Rachel. You've worked so hard for this, and you deserve every bit of success." In her next session with Dr. Vale, Rachel reflected on the experience. "It wasn't easy," she said, "but I realized that I'm stronger than I thought, and the anxiety didn't go away. It was there, but I didn't let it control me." Dr. Vale nodded. "That's a crucial distinction," he said. "The goal isn't to eliminate anxiety. It's to learn how to live with it and move forward anyway. You turned a moment of fear into an opportunity for growth. That's true resilience." The presentation became a turning point for Rachel, a tangible proof of her progress. It wasn't just about winning the client. It was about reclaiming her confidence and realizing that she had the tools to handle life's challenges. From that moment on, Rachel approached her work and personal life with a renewed sense of self-assurance. She continued practicing mindfulness, setting boundaries, and challenging the perfectionist thoughts that once held her back. Anxiety still appeared from time to time, but Rachel now saw it as a signal rather than a roadblock, a reminder to slow down, reassess, and take things one step at a time. In the weeks following her successful presentation, Rachel felt a profound shift in both her professional and personal life. Winning the client's trust and securing the contract had been a major victory. But the real reward lay in what the experience taught her about herself. For the first time in years, Rachel felt a sense of clarity and control, not because her anxiety had disappeared, but because she had learned how to manage it. Rachel began implementing the tools she'd gained from her sessions with Dr. Vale into her daily routine. Each morning she set aside 5 minutes to center herself with mindful breathing, a ritual that grounded her before diving into the demands of her day. She continued to use time-blocking strategies, dedicating focused intervals to her most important tasks while ignoring distractions. The once chaotic rhythm of her workdays was replaced by a calmer, more intentional flow. At home, Rachel noticed her relationships improving as well. She made a conscious effort to disconnect from work during evenings and weekends, putting her phone away and being fully present with Eric. They began revisiting old traditions, like Friday movie nights and Saturday morning hikes, which had been neglected during her period of overwhelming anxiety. The quality of her friendships deepened too, as she allowed herself to be vulnerable about her struggles and discovered how much support she truly had. During one of their final sessions, Dr. Vale asked Rachel to reflect on her journey. "If you could go back and talk to the Rachel who first walked into this office, what would you tell her?" he asked. Rachel thought for a moment, then smiled. "I'd tell her that it's okay to not have it all figured out, that asking for help doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're human, and that it's possible to live with anxiety without letting it define you." Dr. Vale nodded. "That's a powerful realization. Anxiety isn't something we fix, it's something we learn to navigate, and you've built tools to help you do just that." They spent the rest of the session discussing how Rachel could maintain her progress. Dr. Vale emphasized the importance of self-awareness, encouraging Rachel to check in with herself regularly and adjust her habits as needed. Life will throw new challenges your way, he said, but you've proven that you're capable of adapting and thriving. Reflecting on Rachel's journey, Dr. Vale saw her story as a testament to the resilience of the human mind. He shared a powerful insight with his audience. The people who handle anxiety best aren't those who never feel it. They're the ones who learn to understand it, respond to it, and grow through it. Anxiety is a signal, not a sentence. It's your mind's way of telling you that something needs attention, and when you listen to it with curiosity instead of fear, you open the door to transformation. Dr. Vale emphasized that Rachel's progress wasn't the result of one big breakthrough, but a series of small, intentional steps. True change happens in the moments when you choose to show up for yourself, even when it's hard, he said. It's about building habits that align with your values and creating space for growth, one day at a time. Turning his attention to the viewers, Dr. Vale posed 3 reflective questions. Where in your life is anxiety showing up as a signal? What small step can you take today to address it with compassion? How would your life change if you approached your fears as opportunities for growth instead of obstacles? He encouraged viewers to start small, whether it was setting a boundary, practicing a grounding technique, or simply acknowledging their feelings without judgment. You don't have to face everything all at once, he reminded them. Progress is made one step at a time. For Rachel, the presentation marked the beginning of a new chapter, not the end of her journey. She continued to practice the tools she'd learned, not just during moments of anxiety, but as part of her everyday life. She made time for the things that brought her joy, like painting and photography, rediscovering the creativity that had first inspired her to become a designer. In her work, Rachel began taking on new challenges with a sense of excitement rather than dread. She embraced opportunities to lead workshops, collaborate with other creatives, and even mentor younger designers in her industry. Each step forward reinforced her belief that she was capable, even in the face of uncertainty. Her relationship with Eric also deepened. They started planning their future together, something Rachel had avoided during her most anxious moments. "I feel like I'm final,"